Like many today, I'm thoroughly obsessed with watching, reading about, and listening to stories of true crime. I can't quite get enough of this sordid form of entertainment. If you spend enough time in the genre, you know one of the fundamental true crime truths: most stories do not have happy endings. The majority end with grief and a grave. However, there are some rare cases in which targets manage to fight back and survive. Not only that, they muster the courage to face their attackers in court and put them behind bars. So here are 10 escaped victims of serial killers. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on my future videos. If you've already subscribed, welcome back. 10. Kala Brown. Todd Kohlhepp started his criminal career at an early age. Back in 1986, a 15-year-old Kohlhepp kidnapped a young girl who was his age, took her back home, and raped her. He was charged in 1987 and served 14 years in prison. Released in 2001, Kohlhepp started his killing spree a couple of years later. Fast forward to 2016. 30-year-old Kala Brown and her boyfriend, Charles Carver, were hired by Kohlhepp, who was now a successful realtor, to work on his land. They went missing soon after. A few months later, detectives began searching Kohlhepp's property after tracing the couple's last cell phone signals to that area. They found Kala Brown chained to the wall inside a storage container where she had been living for the past 2 months. Police also found Charles Carver's body on the premises. Kohlhepp had shot him multiple times for being smart-mouthed. Subsequently, Kala revealed that Kohlhepp once dragged her to 3 graves on the property and said that she would go into one of them if she didn't behave. That's when investigators first realized that they could be dealing with a serial killer. Eventually, they found the bodies of another couple who had gone missing the year before. However, most shocking was when Kohlhepp confessed to the unsolved mass murder of 4 people in a shootout at a superbike motorsport shop back in 2003. 9. Carol DaRonch fled Ted Bundy. In 1974, Carol DaRonch, a resident of Salt Lake City, Utah, narrowly escaped the clutches of one of the most diabolical serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy. Dressed as a police officer, Bundy approached DaRonch in a parking lot, explained that her car had almost been stolen, and said she needed to file a report with him. She followed him to his Volkswagen and got inside, where he quickly handcuffed her and tried to strike her with a crowbar. However, DaRonch resisted and fled. Her story provided police with important details about Bundy's abduction techniques, and in 1975, an officer pulled over Bundy in his Volkswagen, which they knew about from DaRonch's report, in which they found handcuffs. They arrested Bundy. DaRonch identified him as the culprit, and he was put behind bars. Even though he later escaped from prison, he was recaptured in 1978. After confessing to killing 28 women, he was sentenced to death and executed in Florida in 1989. 8. Kate Moir. In 1986, Kate Moir was just 17 when she was abducted by Australia's most infamous killer couple, David and Catherine Burney. By then, they had already kidnapped, raped, and murdered 4 women within the span of a month. After picking up Moir at knife point, the couple took her to their home in Perth, where they tormented and raped her repeatedly. That night, Kate had to sleep in the same bed as the Burneys, handcuffed to David. Kate managed to escape the next day when David left for work. During a drug buy at the door, Catherine forgot to chain up her captive and Kate was able to escape through the window. Afterward, the victim had the unexpected obstacle of getting the police to believe her story. In fact, the higher-ups at Palmyra Police Station weren't convinced and assigned 22-year-old rookie Laura Hancock to Kate's case. Unlike her superiors, Constable Hancock believed Kate due to the amount of detail that she was able to provide. She knew the couple had a Rocky VHS tape and a Dire Straits cassette because they were playing while she was a captive. Kate also knew the name of her rapist was David Burney, even though he had used an alias, because she saw it on a medicine bottle. She even described little drawings that she had made around the house to convince others she was there. This was enough for police to investigate and eventually arrest the Burneys. Subsequently, David confessed to 4 murders and took investigators to the graves. 7. Whitney Bennett survived an attack from the Night Stalker. In the early hours of July 5, 1985, Richard Ramirez entered 16-year-old Whitney Bennett's bedroom through an unlocked window. He attacked the teenager with a tire iron and strangled her in the Sierra Madre home she shared with her parents. When she regained consciousness, Bennett screamed for her parents, who promptly got their daughter the medical help she needed to save her life. While Ramirez, who was dubbed the Night Stalker for the brutal murders he committed in and around Los Angeles and San Francisco, stole some of the teenager's jewelry, he left behind a bloody footprint law enforcement used to link the attack to his other crimes. The following month, Ramirez was apprehended and, in 1989, Bennett testified at his trial. She provided valuable testimony against the man who tried to murder her. Ramirez was convicted of multiple counts of murder, sexual assault, and attempted murder, and while he was sentenced to death, he passed away in 2013 due to complications secondary to B-cell lymphoma. 6. Maria Viricheva. 3 months pregnant and unmarried, 19-year-old Maria Viricheva was working as a saleswoman at the time of her encounter with one of Russia's most notorious serial killers, Alexander Pichushkin, also known as the chessboard killer. She was new at her job and had been set up with it by her boyfriend, who was also the father of her child. Earlier that day, the two had gotten into an argument, and afterwards she found herself distraught in a metro station in Moscow. Pichushkin spied Maria and, noting her obvious state of despair, struck up a conversation with her. Maria, desperate and alone, welcomed the company. Hearing of her situation, Pichushkin offered her a chance to earn some additional money, telling her that he had stashed some stolen cameras in a well in nearby Bitsevsky Park and that he would give her some to sell. Even though it was late in the evening, Maria, not even knowing if her job would be there for her in the morning anyway, agreed to go with him to retrieve the cameras. When they arrived at the spot, Pichushkin lifted the cover from the well and told her to look inside. As she did so, he quickly snatched her up and threw her in. She clung to the sides of the well to avoid falling, but Pichushkin grabbed her head and repeatedly slammed it into the side of the well. She had little choice but to let go. The last thing she heard was her killer yell, "Take a bath there," as she plummeted into the darkness. She tumbled over 9 meters, before landing knee-deep in sewage water that was rapidly flowing down a drain pipe. She was caught in the current, and only by swiftly removing her jacket and boots did she manage to place her hands and feet on the sides of the drain and stop her further descent. Had she not done so, she would have reached the end of the drain pipe to a section that was completely filled with water and drowned. Fortunately, she stopped herself near another well leading up from the drain pipe and managed to climb to the top, only to find that she was too weak to push the well cover open above her. Luckily, a passing woman heard her cries for help and saw the well cover raise a bit as Maria tried to pry it open, and the woman ran to alert 2 security guards. They lifted the well cover and pulled Maria to safety. 5. Jane Doe. On September 14, 2016, police from Ashland, Ohio, released the 911 call which led to the capture of serial killer Sean Great. The call came from Great's 6th would-be victim, a woman who was only identified as Jane Doe per state laws relating to victims of sexual assaults. Obviously in distress, the woman was trying to remain calm and whisper while talking to the dispatcher. The victim wanted to avoid waking up Great, who was sleeping and armed with a taser. She tried to escape but found that all the doors were either locked or had no knobs. Luckily for Jane Doe, she knew the address of the house. So officers were able to arrive shortly and rescue her before Great woke up. Upon searching the house, police found the bodies of 2 women, and the killer subsequently confessed to 3 more murders. In interviews following his arrest, Sean Great had no issues admitting to the murders and giving details about how they happened. However, he claimed that he was never going to kill Jane Doe, insisting that the 2 were going to get married. 4. Regan Martin. David Allen Gore was a rapist and serial killer who was active in the late 70s and early 80s in the United States. He was executed for his crimes in 2012, and his accomplice Fred Waterfield was sentenced to consecutive life sentences in prison. In all, Gore killed 6 women. He and Waterfield abducted their final 2 victims on July 26, 1983. They were 14-year-old Regan Martin and 17-year-old Lynn Elliott, and it's a day Regan will never forget. She's the only one of Gore's victims to survive. It began when Gore and Waterfield picked the girls up at the beach, planning to bring any who were willing to go back to Gore's parents' house. After getting Martin and Elliott in the car, the glove box popped open, revealing a .22 pistol, which Gore used to threaten Martin. At first taking it for a joke, it quickly became apparent that it was not. They were taken to the house, where both were sexually assaulted. In all likelihood, Elliott saved Martin's life, and sacrificed her own, by attempting to escape. While Gore was assaulting Martin, Elliott slipped out of the house, naked and handcuffed, and was running down the driveway when Gore spotted her, having heard the door. He shot Elliott in the head in full view of a child witness, and it was her murder that he was convicted of and sentenced to die for in 1984. The witness called police, who were able to arrive in time to rescue Martin. 3. Rebecca Garde. Rebecca Garde worked as a telemarketer in Seattle in 1982. She had just gotten off work and was tired of waiting out in the rain for her bus, so she decided to hitchhike home on a cold night in November. The man who eventually offered her a ride seemed as ordinary as the Dodge pickup he was driving, so she happily accepted his offer. Had she known that he would eventually be convicted of killing 48 women like her, she might have declined instead. While riding in his vehicle, she offered him sex in exchange for $20, figuring she could use the money to buy weed when she got home. It was at this point that she began to get an odd feeling about the man she was with, so as a precaution, she asked to see his identification, which he agreed to. This put her a little more at ease, at least he wasn't a cop. They parked by a trailer park and the man suggested they go into the woods for some privacy. Once they reached a spot that was relatively secluded, Gary Ridgway attacked her and tried to strangle her to death from behind. Fighting him off by pushing him into a tree, she stunned him and ran to a nearby trailer for help. Her attacker immediately fled the scene. Due to her lifestyle and a general fear of the police, Garde waited nearly 2 years after her attack before she contacted the authorities, and although her forthcoming would not lead directly to his capture, it did help law enforcement build a more solid case around the most prolific serial killer in the United States. Ridgway picked up and killed at least 15 more women in the same area along the Pacific Highway south where he attacked Garde, and her description of him at least gave them something to move on. In 2001, Ridgway was finally apprehended and sentenced to life in prison. Rebecca Garde remains his only known surviving victim. 2. Lisa McVey Noland. Back in 1984, Tampa Bay residents were terrorized by the 8-month-long killing spree of Bobby Joe Long, who murdered at least 10 women after previously committing dozens of rapes across Florida as the classified ad rapist. Long's latest target was Lisa McVey Noland, a 17-year-old who went missing one November morning while biking home from work. Long pulled up alongside her, yanked her off the bike, tied her up, and threw her in his car. Then he took Lisa to an apartment where he proceeded to rape her for 26 hours. In a bizarre twist, Lisa had actually written her suicide note earlier that night. She was planning to end it all when she got back home after enduring years of sexual abuse from a family member. However, under these excruciating circumstances, Lisa's survival instincts kicked in and she was determined to fight for her life. Lisa relied on many things that she had learned from crime shows. When Long calmed down, she talked to him like a 4-year-old and tried to build a relationship. She humanized herself, hoping that it might make it harder for him to kill her. In the end, it worked. When Long was finished, he dropped Lisa off in her neighborhood instead of killing her like he had done to so many others. Furthermore, Lisa made mental notes about the car, the apartment where she was taken, and her abductor. Eventually, this helped police to apprehend Bobby Joe Long. 1. Roger Sproston. During the 1980s, Roger Sproston decided to leave his home in the West Midlands and hitchhike across America. Eventually, he landed a job driving an ice cream van in Los Angeles, until the van was stolen. While trying to hitch a ride downtown, he was approached by a man driving a red Ford Pinto. Sproston didn't feel threatened by the driver but immediately sensed that he gave off an overpowering bad vibe. The man in question was William Bonin, one of 3 serial killers who prowled Southern California's highways in the 80s. Despite his bad feeling, Roger still got in the car. While driving, Bonin started mumbling under his breath, and eventually, Sproston asked him to pull over and let him out. Bonin obliged at first and stopped the car on the side of the freeway. Afterward, however, he took out a length of cord, wrapped it around Sproston's neck, and started choking him. Fortunately for Roger, he managed to slip his fingers under the cord before Bonin tightened it. He also turned around and kicked his attacker in the groin, which allowed Roger to stumble out of the car onto the grassy verge. Bonin made a speedy getaway. Afterward, Sproston flagged down a police car and told them his story. Shockingly, he learned that they were already looking for several people killing hitchhikers on the highways. He gave them a description of Bonin and his car. 10 days later, the freeway killer was in custody.